Hey there, guys. This is Flamzeron, aka YouTube's Toske, and as I've been going through the Batman Vampire comics, the time has come for me to talk about and review the second story that was included in this collection. It's called Bloodstorm, and this one, I haven't read the third one yet. I'm actually probably going to start reading it right after I record this review, but I feel like Bloodstorm, both based on just the general marketing I've seen for this collection as well as the story itself. I think Bloodstorm seems to have been the big story. Like the picture you see on here, like not in this exact format, but the picture of Batman on the tree with like the red and the bats, like that's the cover art for the omnibus that I have. That picture blown up. And I definitely think so far between the two that I've read so far, and we'll have to see again how things go with the third one. But I think this one is the more layered of the two, and I'll get into what I think specifically about it as we go along, obviously. But yeah, review time. Quick story synopsis. Batman's a vampire, and there will be spoilers, I guess I should say. I mean, I don't know how old this comic is. I imagine maybe 10 years old. I'm not sure. But if you didn't know, Batman's a vampire. That's sort of the whole theme with this story. Batman's a vampire. Though, like I said, this one I think has a little bit more layers to it. And basically, there's still some quote-unquote nests, they've been calling it, of vampires. And the Joker, he starts organizing them and is doing an entire takeover of Gotham by wiping out various gang members, infecting them with vampirism so they can join his side. And then the Joker plans to like take over the entire world, the entire nation, and everything with his little vampire army. And Batman, he defeats them, but at what cost? no. But this whole thing with Batman, since he's a vampire, he's having to fight the urge to drink blood. And early on, it's shown that he's doing this by drinking the serum. I assume it's using the recipe that Tanya had. But obviously, Tanya's dead, so that he can't ask for any help should the serum stop working. Yep, it stops working. If you can't tell by my offhand little voice thing, but yeah, basically, with one of I think his name is Creech or Cretin or something. His first name is Cretin. Yeah, I think it's Cretin Creech actually. It's when Batman's fighting him. He's all like, "The blood is like ecstasy, man. We ain't talking about no soda pop." He says something like that, and Batman, he's fighting the urge. And even in this conversation, you can kind of get a hint that he's still kind of struggling with it because he's like, "I'm not like you. I don't kill people." And then, I mean, you can argue that Cretan was kind of still talking about Batman being like his crew, like vampires, like the real vampires. But then he starts going like, "Oh man, blood's really cool and shit." He's like, "I'm not like you. I don't kill people." To me, it kind of sounded like he was kind of still focused on it, and he wasn't entirely listening. That's the way it came off to me. Again, I feel like you can take it like, oh, he's just sort of responding to what Cretan's actually saying. Also, Alfred actually makes these wooden daggers that Batman uses to kill the vampires effectively, usually in combination with like his newly found super strength, that super strength that he had on top of like his martial arts mastery. So it's like ultra strength really. But so yeah, Batman is basically doing a war on the remaining vampires, and he's even he's told Commissioner Gordon, he's like, if it gets too out of hand, I might need your help and like help me take care of the and he ends up having he being Commissioner Gordon, ends up having to help kill the vampires, particularly of like the people that the Joker has been getting infected. He doesn't have like a serum or anything, but like like Cretan Creech and his crew and like this, he has like, the Joker basically has like this little army of vampires. And Batman, he starts on his own, he starts kind of defeating some of the vampire groups. And along the way, one of them, who happens to be a werewolf like creature, I don't entirely understand the connection. Like I don't know if it, I don't remember if it was I don't think it was Cretan creature. I think it was someone different. But basically, this person starts stalking a woman who ends up being Selina Kyle, and bites her and turns her into like a werecat, which makes me kind of think about the werewolf lore in a way. Like, what if it's not about the specific animal you turn into, and what if it's more about like the animal that you are most spiritually connected, or the one you most associate yourself with, you turn into. That's just conjecture. That's just sort of my take on it. Selina Kyle, she becomes this literal Catwoman. I guess this story would have to taken place before Batman meets Selina, because she apparently doesn't know him, and he doesn't make any sort of hint that he knows her. She actually addresses herself as Selina Kyle. Batman does use the term Catwoman, and I think part of that is just like literary association, or a way of letting the readers know that yes, this is actually literally Catwoman. And of course, afterwards she names herself, as like later on she names herself in that scene. She kind of takes the role of Tanya as sort of like the female lead, which, for the sake of this story's of rules on vampirism, is actually kind of important. Sort of how they do it. And so and she wants revenge on the people who, or the person who turned her into this werecat, and she believes that this group might have done it. So I'm guessing it might have been just a vampire that could turn into a wolf. I know, like, one of the rules that they can just turn to animals. I think that's kind of established in sort of like this. I think her name's Ariane. She's sort of like this librarian, and she's sort of like the I say librarian sort of like as like an adjective, not like as a as what she, because I don't remember if she's a librarian or not, but she's basically she's an expert on like monsters and whatnot, and Batman kind of goes to her for like information. There's even like a big scene where like he's asking like, how do I get, I think he's asking about like vampires and whatnot, and there's some pretty good dialogue there where he's just all like, where she's all like, why are you so interested in a vampire? He's like, I've got experience. It's like personal experience, more than you know, something like that. And it was a nice little back and forth between the two. And he ends up getting upset because like she kind of gives sort of like this half answer. It's sort of like kind of like a weird I don't know from what I remember. And he gets frustrated and like leaves. Because he's desperately trying to find a cure, for lack of a better term, for like not even a cure for vampirism, a cure for the thirst of vampirism, which he's been kind of struggling with. And there's a scene where he bites the head off of a rat, and he's like, no, and he gets like a fever because the rat blood. And at first he sort of declines Selina Kyle's help, and then he's like, I need help. It's kind of, some of the faces that Batman makes in this comic are scary, and some of them are actually kind of funny. Like there's one where he's just like like the ones where he's sweating profusely when he's either sick after drinking the rat blood, or when he's like sweating when he's being dressed down by like Cretan or the Joker, and and they're all like, you like blood? It's like, I don't fucking want blood, but you want blood. No, I don't. That's really bad. That's not even an impersonation. That's just That's more mockery, not intentional mockery. It was a joke. Anyway, Selina Kyle takes Batman into her house and kind of nurses him back to health, and he's able to sort of get over the thirst. It's kind of, it's not really getting, the way it's kind of explained is like, sort of paraphrasing, but the way to sort of get rid of like the thirst without the serum, or without just manpowering it, which I think is kind of how Tanya did it. I think it was in conjunction with the serum, and I think that's something Bruce might have either forgot or misunderstood. Though funny I call him Bruce because, you know, Bruce is as himself, like Bruce Wayne, he's only shown like in a dream sequence involving Tanya, but for the rest of it, it's just pure Batman. So at this point, Bruce has literally taken on the Batman persona. He's you could even argue he's no longer Bruce Wayne. I don't remember if Alfred addresses him as Master Bruce or anything like that. I don't recall him. I think it was just Master, and they might have done that deliberately because, especially with Bruce being Batman 24/7 now, and also the fact that he's a vampire now, it's kind of like he's a different person, really. But I'm getting off track. The quote unquote cure, it's more like a coping mechanism, which on that grounds makes the vampirism seem more contemporary. And I only say that just because of like stuff like ADHD, how like, there's not necessarily a cure for it, but like you can either grow out of it or you cope with it. Stuff like that. It's like the touch of a woman, the love of a woman, and this story is definitely written for its time. I can say that much. And it is a little cheesy, but I mean, I try to see it more as like the coping rather than the sort of like the shoehorned romance. Because it's Selina Kyle, I feel like it's also a bit of romance, but at the same time, I think the main point of it was the idea of like focusing on something else as opposed to just letting it consume you. So with Selina and with any help he can get from Commissioner Gordon, Batman is able to he figures out that the Joker is like the one doing all this, and with the help of Selina and Commissioner Gordon, he's able to really bring down the amount of vampires. And it ultimately comes to a final showdown with the Joker. It's actually not that long. It's kind of interesting, and it's actually, well, I don't want to give away too much, even though this is a spoiler review. But anyway, like the Joker sets up this plan, and like he leads Batman into like this church with like a bunch of like crosses, and he's all like, it doesn't really hurt me. He's like, what? Because I don't need to fucking worry about being a vampire, and like I've overcome everything. Which is funny because I'm pretty sure it's before. I don't remember if it's before or after I think it's actually before. Where Selina Kyle actually takes an arrow and dies protecting Batman. And so Batman kind of loses his anti-drug in a way, because he's given up on the serum because it's, in his words, not enough. And now Selina Kyle is dead, which I think also sort of cements this story not being canon in the main Batman lore. If not because, one, it kind of makes Batman sort of, it changes kind of his whole identity being a vampire. 2, Wayne Manor is destroyed. 3, Selina Kyle is dead. 4, the Joker dies. Batman kills the Joker. But he ends up giving in to the thirst and drinking the Joker's blood. And then he's like, no, forgive me, Selina. Forgive me, Tanya. I have failed. So, that's the main reason why I say it's layered, if he had just overcome the thing, I would have been like, okay, whatever. But it's because of this that the story is more layered, because technically Batman loses the battle. If we're talking, what's the big battle? Is it Batman versus the vampires, or Batman versus the Joker, or is it Batman versus himself? And if you see it as Batman versus himself, he actually loses that fight. He defeats the vampires and he defeats the Joker, but he loses against the battle with his thirst for blood. And so he does the vampire stuff to, kill the Joker. The way they do the once you've been bitten, you've been infected, and you can turn into a vampire after you've been bitten vampire thing. So Batman has to like use the wooden daggers to or like the wooden stakes. I think they get to a point where he stopped using the daggers, but instead using stakes. I think Batman might have had like maybe one or two. I don't remember exactly, but and so he stabs the Joker. Then they do the decapitation thing, which I actually think is kind of strange, because if we're going with traditional vampire lore, like, isn't the wooden stake in the heart supposed to kill the vampire? Isn't that supposed to be like the thing that actually kills? Like, I don't really get the double duty. I understand that it's sort of like a, just to make sure kind of thing, but it seems kind of overkill, because it's the stabbing, then the decapitation of the head, and Batman even has like a silver hatchet. And you can argue that it's the silver that kind of makes it work, but still, like, wooden stake in the heart, isn't that supposed to kill the vampire? I will say this though, me being a writer, obviously I've got my own story. One of the sections in my main story does deal with vampires, and I got kind of inspired. I kind of like the idea of the stake in the heart not necessarily killing the vampire. Maybe it paralyzes them so that you can decapitate them. Maybe that's the, for lack of any other term, slayer, a vampire hunter. Maybe that's how they can kill the vampires. They have to paralyze first and then decapitate. I think that's actually kind of interesting. But yeah, Batman, he loses the fight against his thirst for blood. And of course, before, when he came in, like, the crucifixes didn't hurt him. He's like, I am pure. But once he bites, it does hurt. There's even a panel where, like, he's being kind of distraught, and there's a panel where, like, he looks really kind of ghoulish, and that's sort of like a true vampire form in a way. And I have seen a little bit of, I saw one panel of the third story, and I think the one that was in Bloodstorm is meant to be foreshadowing of the third story. But basically, Batman now sees himself as impure. He gave in to the temptation, and so he asks Alfred and Commissioner Gordon to kill him. They do the stake in the heart and whatnot. I don't think they decapitate him. I think it's just the stake in the heart, which I guess is sort of like, I don't know why they probably because decapitating him would have been too gruesome for, like, the viewers, though apparently biting a rat's head off wasn't gruesome. It was apparently fine. That actually kind of bothered me. I guess we can go into the review now. I really liked the story. I thought it was layered. Like I said, one of the things that kind of bothered me was the biting off the head of the rat, because that was just kind of a little too grotesque for me. Like, you guys know how I am. I love animals. I know rats are kind of like pests or vermin, or they can be seen that way, but it was like since it's a city, like, rats, they're probably super common, so as far as I know, they could be all over the place. But I felt like biting its head off was a little much. It's like, and I felt like it can be seen as sort of giving mixed messages, because with vampirism, like, the thing that Batman is struggling with is thirst, not hunger, because he bites the thing's head off, and they don't show him, like, swallowing it or anything. They just show him kind of, like, biting the head. I don't know, maybe his stomach acid disintegrated the head. I do believe he kills it. Like, he doesn't like do it while it's alive. But I don't know. I think it would have been better. How I would have done is like he holds it up kind of like he's holding a hot dog, not to reference a video or anything. And he bites like the back of it and gets the blood that way, and then like tosses it aside. And then you see like the puncture wounds. That I think that would have done the job. Personally, that's how I would have. I understand that he is extremely desperate at this point. He just doesn't know what to do. And so he's kind of like, in a way, he's probably scared. He's like, no. He's probably afraid of becoming evil. You know, he even though he's sort of like, he uses fear to his advantage, or at least at a point he did. He's sort of a symbol of, he's a protector. He's the Dark Knight. He's not the Dark monster. He's the Dark Knight. The Cape Crusader, if you will. So that was my real only complaint. I was able to handle it, and I was actually able to eat leftovers from Longhorn, so it wasn't that big a deal. I still think that like biting it and then tossing it aside would have been that's how I would have done it, and really just on the grounds that it was just a little too grotesque for me. You know, it's just me, so that's really the only complaint. The only other thing that I can really think of, the Batman's like internal thoughts. I feel like because I'm used to them, I can read them pretty easily now. But the cursive is still kind of hard to read, so I kind of have to skip over words, and I don't really like doing that. Like I remember a teacher one time saying like, oh, you know, if there's a word you don't know how to pronounce, just replace it with, you know, another word like Tom or something. Or Josh or Ben or Cliggle or Bruce or whatever. I don't like that because I feel like I don't like having to like censor, or not necessarily censor, but like have to like change or take out like or internalize. I like just kind of reading it for what it is, because then I feel like I can kind of take it in better. Again, I could still read it pretty easily, but like I said, the art was or rather there are some pictures of Batman where he looked kind of scared. Like there's one where he was talking to the Ariane, or however you say her name, and he gets like this red-eyed sort of like gum showing sort of growly face, and that was actually kind of freaky looking. The thing with the rat, you know, it was pretty freaky and grotesque looking. With that in mind, the art was actually pretty good. Anyone who appeared in Red Rain looked the same. I think it's the same artist too. You know, it looked about what you would expect. Selina Kyle looked like about the way she would. I can't. The Joker, he looked kind of like a mix between 80s to 90s film Joker, and sort of like the he looked sort of like a weird sort of in between stage of Joker. He looked a little larger. At first, he kind of looked like either a old English sort of heavy coated gentleman or a hobo. I don't want to use the term hobo, but and he does wear like a purple pinstripe suit, so he does kind of get in that like typical like Joker look. On the note of the Joker, I don't think his plan necessarily was to get Batman to give into darkness I guess for lack of any other word, like give into like the thirst of. I don't think that was his plan. I think because he didn't seem to know that Batman was quote unquote pure. Like as far as he knew, like, oh, he's tainted now, so he can like get defeated really easily, with the crucifix and the garlic and the silver and the wood and the stake in the heart, and not the ribeye or the T-bone, a wooden stake. On that note, though, any smiles he might give might be a bit misleading. though I do think I really don't think that the Joker was planning for Batman to give in to the temptation to drink blood. Um, but I think this story was also pretty long. I don't remember. It felt longer. It wasn't paced as fast as the first story. It dragged a little bit more, and I think the reason why is because it just had more going on, and it was more layered. So really, so far, I think it's actually the better written story. I do like sort of the just the Batman beats the bad guy kind of story as well. This one, Bloodstorm, is definitely a better overall story. Like, if you want like a really layered and interesting story, this is definitely the one to read. Though, keep in mind the cursive if you have a hard time reading cursive. I did like how whenever there were multiple characters on screen, and it was drawn in a way that it wasn't easily to tell who was talking first or who was talking based on speech bubble placement. They would like alter the speech bubbles. Like Selina's, she had like sort of like this wavy kind of thing, and it can also kind of give a sense of voice as well. It was a good story. It was really good. And I guess that'll bring us to a close on this review. The next one's going to be Crimson Mist, which is the final story. That'll be interesting to read. I've only seen like one panel from it. I don't remember. We'll just have to see kind of how things go. But yeah. We're getting close to the end of this little Batman thing. You know, if you guys like this, I might try to read more Batman comics. I do have two others, A Death in the Family and Batman and Robin White Knight. And that one's where Dick Grayson is Batman, so that will be kind of interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching, and this is Flamesron, aka Sasuke, signing out. See you later.